Well, welcome to the Community Christian Podcast. My name is Austin. I'm one of the pastors here at Community Christian. This is Hunter. He is our young adults director. And we have been going through the Book of Ruth over the last 5 to 6 weeks, I believe. And it's been incredible talking about God's providence and relationships, which relationships can be a little touchy to talk about, let's be honest. But it's been very good thinking about the chapter that we're in and the next chapter that we want to write. Just so many good things coming out of the Book of Ruth. Hunter, all right, here's the first question I have for you. How would you define God's providence?
Right. So we've been using this working definition of God's providence over the last few weeks, and it's this: God using natural means to accomplish his supernatural will. And that's something that we see kind of really clearly in the Book of Ruth. You see this kind of very, on the surface, a very plain kind of story. It's in this period of time in Israel when they're under the judges. And if you know the book of Judges, it's when Israel is being disobedient to God. It says that everyone was doing what was right in his own eyes, that is, not according to the will of God and his plans for them. And so you get this really kind of plain story, this beautiful love story that happens in this short little vignette of this time. And it's an interesting thing to read through. And you get these little glimpses where it says, and it just so happened that something came about, right? And under these very kind of natural circumstances, you see that God is working out his will to bring about his supernatural plan for the world. And that's what we got to in the last couple weeks of this series. When we get to the end, you see that this line that Ruth and Boaz are preserving, ultimately this becomes the line of King David. And so at first, you're like, man, what's going on? What's going on in this story? It doesn't seem to fit the grand narrative flow of the whole Bible. But ultimately, even in these kind of very natural, plain circumstances, you see that God is bringing about this powerful narrative for his kingdom.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a great reminder that, most of life is probably pretty mundane. And I think sometimes we struggle with that. We go, what is the point of washing the dishes every day or whatever it might be? But God can be in the midst of all of that. And he's writing a beautiful story in each of us. And I think the Book of the Ruth just reminds us of that. So my next question for you is, where have you seen God's providence in your own life? Like, what's a good story that you'd like to share?
Right. Honestly, for me, I think growing up, if you had asked me where God was working in my life, it would be hard for me to explain to you, right? But even as I get a little bit older, I'm still pretty young, but getting a little bit older and being able to look back at some of the things, people ask me about, man, where did you learn all this information? Or who are your teachers or whatever it was? And I go back and I think about how God has shaped and formed me. And ultimately, it always comes back to my family. And a lot of people don't know this about me, but early on in my childhood, I didn't have a very good relationship with my parents, which would surprise a lot of people now because we're like best friends. But even in those rocky situations, when you're even like, I have a really big personality. I've always really kind of had a big personality. And so do my parents. And so we would kind of rub up against each other, right? And you learn things in that. You learn how to do relationship with people who are different from you, right? And you get to hear their perspective and hear different things in a way that maybe you wouldn't if everything was just easy all the time. And so as I look back at my childhood and my upbringing, I know for certain I would not be where I am today with the maturity and the wisdom that God has given me unless I kind of had those rocky times with my family and my parents. And now I feel such like security in my relationship with my parents. And a lot of people might know this, but your relationship with your parents, in many ways, that's the most formative relationship for your understanding of God. And now having struggled so much with my relationship with my parents, and then now feeling the embrace and the security of that relationship, I just know that God has been preparing me for a really long time to experience just his love in my relationship with him and that security there. And so as I look at how my understanding of God has been shaped for so many years, that's always the thing that I come back to. Like, man, I'm just so grateful for the parents that God gave me. I didn't choose my parents, right?
Yeah.
None of us do. But
Mm-hmm.
I was born into this wonderful, wonderful marriage between my parents, and they have given me so much love and so much grace throughout the many years. And I feel so grateful for the relationship that I have with them and the fact that God gave me these wonderful human beings.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I love your parents.
Yeah.
Yeah, we think back, often we can look back to our childhood and see God's providence, whether there was a good relationship between parents or not. I think back to my experience. There are so many things I could look back and say, wow, like I couldn't see it then, God, but like you used that situation to bring me where I am today. One of them was my father leaving at age 10. And in the midst of that, my mom, sister, and I were completely broke because he left with all the money, basically. And I was about to lose I was going to a Christian school at the time, and we couldn't afford the tuition. And someone heard about our situation in the church and just paid for the tuition.
Wow, yeah.
Like for me and my sister. And that not only kept me in a Christian school when I was young, which I was very valuable for me. It showed me that what the church's function is, to worship him, to love each other, to serve each other. And it really ultimately, that whole situation, including my dad leaving, because that's when I came to know Christ, it led me to where I am today. Like I decided to become a worship leader after that. And I've been leading worship for, close to 3 decades at this point,
wow.
Because of this. And that's one place where I've seen God's providence. Another place is I really solidified, marrying my wife after spending 2 months stuck in a European country called Estonia with my band. I stupidly said yes to a promoter. Like he was like, hey, we're going to go on a European tour. And we were young and dumb. And we're like, yeah, we'll do it. And we gave him, $20,000 or whatever it was at the time. And we trusted him. And then we got there and there was no tour. And I was wrecked. All my dreams were crushed. And I was left wondering, why did I just get stuck in a foreign country? And God, what are you doing in the midst of this? And then, from there, we had to make the decision of, do we keep going forward as a band or not? And we decided to keep going forward. And we actually ended up getting signed at that point and moving forward and releasing a lot of records and touring nationally and globally for a season of life. But the most important piece was, while I was in Estonia for 2 months, I was Skyping. That's Zooming now. I was Skyping with my girlfriend back then was Deanna, my wife now, and we just fell madly in love with each other at that point.
Amazing.
And so we got back, and years later got married. But it was awesome. But yeah, God's
so
providence
funny,
is just all over the place. I'm sorry. I have one more story.
Go for it.
One
Go
more
for it.
providence story, because God's just always working.
Yeah.
Just the other day, we have a lot of bikes in my house. Okay. Like a lot of children's bikes.
Okay.
And we're like, okay, we need to sell one of these bikes. So we put a bike up for sale. It was like $100 or something like that, right? Nothing big. And this lady emails us, a grandmother, and she said, "Oh, my family's a missionary family, and they need a bike, and can I come check it out?" Like I just knew right away. It was like only God would line this up, And she gets there and she tells me the situation of what's going on, and I'm just like, hey, just take the bike. Like I knew before she got there, God's like, you need to just give her the bike. I'm like, perfect, that's awesome. But it's like that's God's providence working out in just the supernatural way, just through something ordinary, by posting something on Facebook. You don't know what relationships or what encounters you'll have with people throughout every day, and we have to have faith to just say yes to what God has in those moments,
Right.
Let
me say something about that I think is interesting too. I think I love talking about God's providence and seeing the way that he works, right? But also, we don't want to give a false impression stuff like this just falls out of the sky every day, right? Like we were saying in the last I think it was this week's sermon, we were talking about God's providence is best seen backwards, right?
Mm.
And it takes time to develop. It takes time to develop that sense of God's work in the, the big scope of your life. But I think the confidence that we have, and maybe to kind of pull together some of the themes of this sermon series too, for a lot of people, one of those big things that they're struggling to give up, right, would be a relationship, right? They really want to hold on to, man, I really want to date someone in the future, right? Or I would really like this marriage to go in a different direction. But ultimately, it doesn't mean that, if we pray, God's just going to show up right there, right? And it's just going to be plain as day to us. I think the hard part for us is we still have to have the confidence that God is working, that God is good, and he continues to shape us and form us, and he will use whatever experience we have right now for his plans in the future.
Right.
But I don't want to give off the false impression that it's just easy, right? When you're just sitting there in that circumstance and we're saying, you got to trust, you got to trust, you got to trust. That's still really hard, right? And it's not as, I think Justin said it on Sunday. It was really great. He said, you can't tell people about chapter 4 and chapter 1, right? Because it's just not going to make sense to them. It's not going to help them in the same way. What you can tell them in chapter 1 is, God is still good. He's still doing his part. And that, sometimes we don't know where it's going to go in the future. But that doesn't mean, just because we don't know where it's going, it doesn't mean that we can't have confidence and peace and solace knowing that he is still good and he still has good plans for us, even if we can't see them right now.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Well,
Wonderful.
It's been a good series in the Book of Ruth, and we're going to close it out here. So enjoy your week. We'll see you Sunday.
Have a great week.